Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a really whirlwind week. It's seen everything from a lottery jackpot so huge it almost feels like unreal to the tricky dance of global tariffs causing chaos right at your doorstep, plus the relentless march of AI breakthroughs and some big shifts under the surface of the global economy. Our mission today, cut through all that noise, pull out the essential bits of knowledge, and connect the dots so you can see the surprising ways these things that seem separate actually impact your world.
Absolutely. And what we'll uncover today are those often hidden threads connecting these stories. You might not immediately see how, say, a massive lottery win reveals similar economic ideas at play in global trade disputes, but, well, the insights are pretty compelling and directly relevant to your understanding of the bigger picture. We'll definitely go beyond just the headlines, give you the context and the so what.
That's exactly what we're after. So let's kick things off with something that probably had a lot of us streaming this week. A truly staggering Powerball jackpot, north of $1.7 billion. I mean, that's a number that gets everyone's attention, right? But the real question is, what happens after you win? We heard two tickets split this prize, one in Texas, one in Missouri. And surprisingly, they face really different financial futures depending on the choices they make. So what were those choices? And why would a lawyer who represents lottery winners, Anders Stoltman, call taking the lump sum a mistake?
Well, yeah, the winners had two main paths, either a lump sum, which is about $410.3 million before taxes, or an annuitized prize. That's $893.5 million spread over 29 years, and it increases 5% each year. Stoltman's caution about the lump sum, it highlights a really crucial point. It's not just about winning the money, it's about what you actually get to keep, and maybe even more importantly, how you manage it. A lot of winners, frankly, just lack the infrastructure,
Yeah.
the financial advisors, the investment plans, all that stuff you need to handle such a sudden huge fortune.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's one thing to get the money, another thing entirely to keep it, make it grow. But okay, beyond the management side, there's the immediate hit, taxes. What does that look like for these winners?
Precisely. Taxes are huge here. Both winners face an automatic 24% federal tax withholding. So for that $410.3 million lump sum, that's roughly $98.5 million gone, right off the top, instantly. And that's just the withholding. Lottery winners, they easily land in the highest federal income tax bracket, which is 37% for 2025. That kicks in for individuals with taxable income over about $626,350. Now, it's important to clarify, this 37% is a marginal rate. It doesn't apply to the entire amount, just the income above certain levels.
Okay, so even after that first 24% chunk is withheld, there's still a massive amount due to the IRS later. But I wonder, for someone suddenly managing that kind of money, is Stoltman's advice about the lump sum being a mistake always true? Like, are there good arguments for taking the lump sum? Maybe if you get expert help right away, could that make it less of a mistake?
That's an excellent point. And yeah, while the mistake idea often focuses on people not knowing enough about finance, a really savvy winner, someone who gets top-tier financial and legal advice immediately, they might actually choose the lump sum. Why? So they can invest it themselves, potentially getting returns higher than that annuity's 5% annual increase. The key things are control and having the right expertise. But here's where geography throws in another curveball. Which state you live in makes a colossal difference. The Missouri winner. They face an additional 4% state withholding. That could be another $16.4 million from the lump sum. And their top state income tax rate is 4.7%. But the Texas winner, they'll pay millions less. Why? Because Texas doesn't tax lottery winnings at all. It's a really stark contrast, isn't it? Shows how much location can impact your bottom line.
Wow, yeah, that's a huge difference just based on where you bought the ticket, a state line. And speaking of what you keep, you mentioned something earlier, the $40,000 SALT deduction cap. That might not hit these mega winners directly, but could you quickly explain what that means for other taxpayers?
Sure. So for other high-income folks, especially in states with high property or income taxes, there's this $40,000 cap on what are called state and local tax SLT deductions. Basically, that's the limit on how much you can subtract for the state and local taxes you paid when you file your federal return. This rule, it came from President Donald Trump's tax bill. It limits how much you can reduce your federal tax bill based on what you paid locally. It can significantly affect your overall taxable income if you're in one of those high-tax states.
Okay, got it. So from lottery dreams to another big personal finance topic, let's talk mortgages, something a lot of us are constantly thinking about. The 30-year fixed rate just saw its biggest one-day drop in over a year. I know, that sounds like good news, right? But what does it really mean for you if you're looking to buy or maybe refinance? The average rate is still around 6.29%. Lowest since October, sure, but way up from those sub 3% rates we saw before the pandemic.
Yeah, a key takeaway here is, while the drop is nice, don't get too excited just yet. Many experts still see 6% as kind of the new normal, maybe for early next year, even if the Fed makes the rate cuts everyone expects. So probably don't expect a quick return to like 4% or 5%. But, and this is the good news, you do have levers you can pull, ways to significantly improve your personal rate.
Okay, what are these levers? Give us the actionable tips. How can you get a better rate?
Right, first thing, improve your credit score. This is crucial. Can't stress it enough. Borrowers with a FICO score between, say, 780 and 850, they might get a 30-year fixed around 6.19%. But if your score is lower, like 700 to 739, it jumps to 6.39%. Now, on a $350,000 loan, that's seemingly small difference. It can mean an extra $13,000 over the life of the loan. So pay your bills on time, obviously. Keep your credit card balances low, ideally under 30% of your limit. And check your credit report for errors. Fix them. Second tip, boost your down payment. If you can manage to put 20% down, it often gets you a lower rate. Plus, you avoid private mortgage insurance, or PMI, which can save you thousands every year. Now, I know the average down payment is lower, especially for first-time buyers, but if you can hit that 20%, the savings are massive.
Yeah, that 20% down, it's a clear benefit from the lender's view, safer loan for them. But you're right, for first-time buyers, scraping together that much cash is often the biggest hurdle. Are there any other strategies or maybe different kinds of loans that could still offer some benefits without needing such a huge chunk upfront?
You're absolutely right that 20% is daunting. Which brings us to the third tip, and this kind of addresses your point. Think beyond the standard 30-year fixed. Adjustable rate mortgages, ARMs, they're becoming more popular again. Especially if you don't plan to stay in the home forever, maybe you have a shorter time horizon. A 76 ARM, for instance, might offer an initial rate around 5.59%, lower than the fixed rate. So it could help you get into the market now. And hey, if rates fall later, you can always try to refinance. But there's a risk, right? If rates go up after that initial period, your payments could jump too. So it's a calculated decision. Depends on your financial plans, how long you think you'll be in that house.
Those are some really solid practical insights for anyone trying to navigate the housing market right now. Okay, let's shift gears. Let's look at the global stage, the intricate world of tariffs. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. International trade, tariffs. They've been making huge headlines. We saw lower Japanese auto tariffs finally formalized at 15%, down from 27.5%. And that happened alongside this massive $550 billion wave of Japanese investment in U.S. projects. Plus, there's talk, apparently very shortly, of putting tariffs on semiconductor imports for companies that don't move production to the U.S.
Yeah, and then you've got Switzerland. They got hit with a surprise 39% tariff by President Trump back in August. But what's interesting is just weeks after that tariff hit, the CEO of Rolex, Jean-Frédéric Dufour, was seen with President Trump at the U.S. Open. It's a little detail, but it really underscores how business leaders are trying to navigate these political shifts. Because, Swiss watchmakers, they expect to hike prices, even though they apparently built up a temporary buffer by shipping more watches before the tariff took effect.
That's fascinating. Just shows how tightly business and politics are linked these days. But tell us more about who actually ends up paying for these tariffs, because there seems to be a lot of confusion and what you called maximum chaos for consumers, especially with this change to the de minimis exemption. What's that about?
Right. The deeper issue this really highlights is who truly bears the cost. And the recent elimination of that de minimis exemption, this rule that used to let small dollar items under $800 come in tax-free. You get rid of that for the first time in nearly 100 years. It has indeed created, well, what some are calling maximum chaos for regular consumers. I mean, imagine this. You order a $750 computer part from Germany, and suddenly you get hit with a $1,400 tariff bill. Or a $300 aluminum case from Sweden that now costs you an extra $620 in duties. Even something like a $600 handbag from Spain could suddenly come with over $1,000 in these unexpected charges.
Wow. So basically buying a nice handbag online from Europe now feels like playing financial roulette with customs. No wonder postal traffic just plummeted.
Exactly. Customers getting slammed with these surprise charges, often with zero warning from the seller overseas. It's led to huge frustration, obviously. Some countries even halted shipments. That's why we saw that 80% drop in postal traffic coming into the U.S. Consumers are left trying to dispute charges, or they refuse the shipment. But sometimes they still get hit with return shipping fees. And legally, get this, an appeals court actually found many of Trump's tariffs unconstitutional. But they're still in effect while it goes to the Supreme Court. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has warned if the Supreme Court voids these tariffs, we could be looking at massive refunds, potentially $750 billion to maybe even $1 trillion. It's a decision the administration wants fast-tracked. This could be a truly unprecedented financial moment.
Okay, so beyond goods moving across borders, the U.S. is also seeing a shift in the flow of people. International tourism to the U.S. is apparently projected to drop significantly this year. So what does all this mean for the travel industry, for the American economy?
Yeah, a key takeaway here is that projected $30 billion loss in international tourism spending for the U.S. this year. It's huge. The data shows a sharp and widespread drop in arrivals. Canadian arrivals alone were down nearly 18% in just the first half of 2025. And instead of visiting the U.S., Canadians are either traveling within Canada or they're bypassing us. They're going to places like Mexico, Latin America, the Caribbean, Western Europeans. They're choosing other spots in Europe or the Middle East. Southeast Asians are also looking more towards Europe and the Middle East. The U.S. share of global international travel, it's been falling steadily, and the forecast is for it to drop to just 4.2% in 2025 and kind of stay there for the next decade. This really indicates a long-term shift. The U.S. maybe isn't the primary international destination it once was. And that impacts local economies, hotels, restaurants, all those industries that rely on foreign tourist dollars.
That's a really significant shift. Could have lasting impacts for sure. Okay, let's dive into the tech world now. AI continues to just push boundaries, reshape industries at, frankly, a breathtaking pace. We saw some pretty remarkable developments this week, starting with a startup making huge waves, the creator of that AI software engineer, Devin.
Indeed, Cognition, the company behind Devin. They just closed a $400 million funding round, which values the company at an astounding $10.2 billion. And this comes just 2 months after they acquired another AI coding startup, Windsurf, whose founders had actually left previously for Google. That deal included a reported $2.4 billion payout for licensing and compensation. What really stands out here is just how quickly these AI startups are hitting these massive multi-billion-dollar valuations, joining the ranks of OpenAI and Anthropic. It really highlights this fascinating, intense battle that's going on for top AI talent and technology, where even really seasoned founders are being lured back with just staggering amounts of money.
Yeah, that truly underscores the fundamental shifts AI is bringing. It's way beyond just writing code. But with so much digital creation happening, this question of identity verification becomes critical, doesn't it? Is that where Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities comes into the picture?
Absolutely. The deeper issue this highlights is exactly that, the need for reliable identity verification in this AI-driven world. So Dan Ives, he's now chairman of a company called 8Co Holdings, and their plan is to acquire WorldCoin, which you might know is backed by Sam Altman as its main treasury asset. Ives believes WorldCoin's blockchain-based identity system, it's poised to become the de facto standard for authentication and identification, especially in the future world of AI because of threats like deepfakes and just the need to prove you're a real human online. And it's not just tech guys thinking this way. Even Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, points to identity verification as being key for things like tokenized funds. So this shows it's becoming a fundamental building block for future finance, not just a niche tech concern.
Right.
Okay, speaking of big moves and building blocks, SpaceX made a huge one, acquiring wireless spectrum licenses from EchoStar for $17 billion. What does this mean for our mobile connectivity and I guess for the whole industry?
Oh, this deal is monumental. It's huge for expanding Starlink's 5G capabilities. They're promising something like a 100x increase in network capacity through upgraded satellites. And it also enables Boost Mobile subscribers to use direct-to-cell service via Starlink. The market reaction was immediate. EchoStar shares jumped 19%. Meanwhile, the big traditional carriers like AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, their shares dipped. It really reflects the kind of competitive disruption that's happening. And this is a really significant development for U.S. connectivity overall, especially because the FCC had apparently been questioning how EchoStar was using its spectrum. And even President Trump had previously sort of prodded for a deal to happen. It just demonstrates how traditional telecom is being reshaped by these new players and satellite tech. Yeah, it's clear that the digital frontier is just constantly being redrawn. What other market movements caught your eye this week that maybe speak to these broader trends?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of market activity, you also saw Robinhood's shares soar 15%. That was after the announcement they're joining the S&P 500 index. They're replacing Caesars Entertainment. And this is a really big deal for Robinhood, right? They've been talked about as a candidate for inclusion for a long time. It kind of reflects its growing maturity, I guess, in the financial landscape. And then in another interesting development, NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang, he's going to be joining President Trump on that UK state visit next week, along with other big names from tech and finance. Huang's attendance is pretty notable, especially as NVIDIA is navigating trying to get licenses to sell its newer Blackwell chips in China. That's an issue where Huang has apparently been developing a close relationship with President Trump. There was even talk about a 15% cut of chip sales, which is kind of a surprising glimpse into how geopolitics and corporate sales can intersect.
Wow, that is quite the detail. A 15% cut. And speaking of market signals, we also saw some significant insider selling last week. What can that tell us?
Yeah, that's a critical point to consider. While lots of stocks are up, we did see significant insider selling last week. NVIDIA director Dawn Hudson, for example, sold $45.5 million worth of shares. That reduced her holdings by about 20%. Now, this kind of selling, what they call discretionary selling, it's different from pre-planned trades that execs often have set up. It's something a lot of investors track pretty closely. Why? Because it could be a potential signal of maybe deeper issues within a company. Even when the stock price itself has been doing really well, it's just a reminder, that not all market signals are straightforward. Sometimes what's happening internally can suggest a more cautious outlook than maybe the external headlines suggest.
Indeed. Market signals often tell a complex story, don't they? Reflecting those deeper currents in the economy. And speaking of those deeper currents, let's look now at the broader economic pulse. Specifically, how everyday people are feeling about their financial futures, about the job market. Recent data shows a pretty significant shift, and it's directly affecting worker confidence.
Yeah, this brings us to a really crucial point about the human element of the economy. The New York Fed survey, it showed worker confidence in finding a new job actually hit a record low. People estimated only about a 44.9% probability of finding new work if they lost their job. This is a really stark reversal from that whole Great Resignation era we were talking about not long ago. And expectations of higher unemployment are rising. Plus, this comes right after that dismal August jobs report. Only 22,000 new jobs added. And the unemployment rate ticked up to 4.3%. That's the highest it's been since October 2021.
That paints a picture of growing anxiety for a lot of people. This must put the Federal Reserve in a really tricky position, right?
Well, it absolutely does. The deeper issue here is the Fed's really delicate balancing act. You look at the markets, they're now pricing in an 88% chance of a quarter-point rate cut next week, and even a 12% chance of a bigger half-point cut like we saw last September. The Fed is caught right between its dual mandate. On one hand, you have a soft labor market, which suggests maybe they should cut rates, but on the other hand, inflation is still above their target. Ruchir Sharma over at Rockefeller International, he warns that cutting rates when the economy is just okay, that's a recipe for a bubble. So the upcoming inflation data later this week is going to be absolutely crucial. We're talking specifically about Producer Price Index, PPI, that tracks what producers pay, and the Consumer Price Index, CPI, which measures what we pay as consumers. Those numbers will land right before the Fed meeting, and they're direct measures of inflation pressures at different points in the economy. Very important.
Right. And beyond just the economic numbers, the political landscape always adds layers of complexity, uncertainty, directly influencing markets, international relations, all of that. So let's look at some key political currents from this past week. We saw a federal appeals court reject President Trump's attempt to overturn that $83.3 million defamation judgment to E. Jean Carroll. His lawyers are apparently expected to appeal a separate $5 million verdict in that case to the Supreme Court.
And over in Europe, France's Prime Minister, François Bayrou, is expected to lose a confidence vote related to budget cuts. That could potentially lead to President Macron having to appoint his fifth prime minister in less than 2 years. That kind of political instability, especially in a major European economy like France, it can definitely ripple through global markets.
All right.
Raises questions about policy continuity, investor confidence, stuff like that. Oh, and Japan also saw its prime minister, Shigeru Ishiba, resign over the weekend. More change there, too.
Wow. Yeah, that is a lot of flux happening globally. But let's bring it back home for a final point. A domestic event that also has some surprising international implications, that massive raid on the Hyundai facility down in Georgia.
Yeah, this brings us to a really significant domestic event. That raid at the Hyundai facility in Georgia, federal agents conducted this massive operation, arrested 475 people. And get this, over 300 of them were South Korean nationals. Now, while it was a record-setting enforcement operation for the Department of Homeland Security, the key insight here, I think, is its intricate ripple effect. It doesn't just impact the manufacturing sector there. It touches on delicate international relations, especially with a key trade partner and ally like South Korea. It really illustrates how even a seemingly local domestic enforcement action can quickly become a foreign policy challenge, underscoring that deep global interconnectedness we've been talking about all along, and the need for diplomatic sensitivity.
So, okay, after covering all that ground, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've explored how these seemingly unrelated events, from the dizzying choices of a lottery winner to the surprising costs hidden in global tariffs, the rapid advancements in AI, even domestic enforcement operations, they're all deeply intertwined, connected to your personal finances and the broader economic and political landscape.
Yeah, this whole collection of news really highlights a world that's, well, accelerating in change and just increasingly interconnected. From the very individual decision of how to manage a massive windfall to the complex, far-reaching ripple effects of trade policies and the incredibly rapid evolution of technology. Every single piece impacts the whole system. And this raises, I think, an important final question for everyone listening. In an era where global and local events are just so deeply tangled together, how do we best prepare ourselves? Not just for the shifts we kind of expect, but for the truly surprising, maybe even counterintuitive outcomes that often seem to define our interconnected world today. Understanding these surprising connections, that's really your shortcut to being truly well-informed.